Yeah, we're on again. It's Wednesday already. I mean, when I used to work, I'm retired now. But when I used to work, time never used to fly so fast. These Fridays didn't come around so quickly. Got today Wednesday, tomorrow Thursday already. That means it's right into Friday. Uh, Boy, time is flying. We got a little mixed up last week because they changed the time. You guys spring forward, of course. We in Belize stay where we are. So we now have to adjust and start an hour earlier, where you guys are starting an hour earlier, but at the same time. I don't know if that makes any sense because it sounds a bit confusing. Gentlemen, let me say good evening to Gregory Morrison, a regular on the show, and of course, Mr. George Myvitt. We have Mr. Covey that was supposed to be coming in. Our regular panelist, Mr. Leonard Brackett, has taken a leave of absence. He was not asked to do that, but he has decided it's best to do that for a while. I'll take at least sabbatical. But guys, the show goes on. We move ahead and we try to fulfill our mandate, which is to stir conversation, discuss issues that's of relevance to our people, both at home and abroad, and hopefully do what we can to bridge the gap between the two, which should be one. Guys, any thoughts?
Well, you spoke about, in terms of topics, a pleasant good night, everyone, at home and abroad means globally. You did speak, Mr. Chair, earlier that in terms of topics, the national budget debate is on, it's pertinent, it's going on. And definitely I believe that we would want to at least discuss that in whatever capacity we can. I'm hopeful that Mr. Jose Kowe will make it on because this would be his forte.
Oh yeah,
He's a finance man, one, and he was a senior minister um, in government, and so he would have the benefit of seeing the budget process from within the belly of the beast as well as from without. So it would be interesting if we could get him going on.
George.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Tell me, George. How do you see it as a fruitful exercise? Do you make heads and tails of it? I, how do you see it?
It's a major, there's a major room for improvement traditionally, not only in relation to the current reading of the budget, but historically. Remember, Mr. Chair, that the budget is an indicator. It's an indicator of government policy. When you say government basically funds certain things, it is saying that this is a priority area for us and we are moving in that direction. I believe that the debates are a lot of pot shots
Right.
in the sense of, well, we did a well in Placencia, and we actually opened a community center in Halakte, and people do not get the purpose. Really, the purpose of the budget debate is lost, one, and two, people don't get to see the big picture. And the big picture is, how does the budget relate to Plan Belize? The current administration, while in opposition, did an excellent job in basically saying what they were going to do once they seized on the reins of government. It was a beautiful exercise, both in terms of the way it was presented and in terms of the content. And I believe that the opposition, I saw three people in there in terms of the brief glimpse that I had of it. There was a leader of the opposition, and then there's a gentleman from the north, and then Tracy Tiega. I did not see Patrick Faber, but I think that's an internal matter for the opposition now. But I do not believe that the the opposition stepped out of its status quo zone. I wouldn't even say comfort. They did not make substantive responses in terms of policy. What are the target? What are the crises in the nation, Mr. Chair? And we know what they are, sir. One of the crises is obviously crime. I heard the leader of opposition basically saying that, well, he was quizzed that, what would you do for crime? And he said, well, you know what I'll do? We are thinking of a special unit within the police. And I don't fault him for that, because that is the extent of his vision. I think that in instances like that, you would hope that the speaker, not the speaker of the House, but the leader of the opposition in this case, could go into what are some of the causative aspect of why you have crime in Belize, and what the government response has been thus far, and how successful or the lack thereof it has been. But you don't get that level of debate, you see. So the system itself doesn't, or let me say the players in the system has not risen to that level of a sort of proactive engagement with the budget. But it's useful and it's necessary.
Yeah, Gregory, have you been keeping up with it? You didn't get to see any of it, did you? Your mic is off. Your mic is off, Greg.
I didn't get to see this speech. I worked today. But I agree with what George says, because I've seen it in the past, and generally the actions on opposition, whether it's the other side or this side that's the opposition, the response have always been a kind of generic political take. It hasn't been a response that kind of address issues and advance the program for the people in terms of trying to address some of the ills of what's going on and how things could be made better. It's usually pop shots that's taken to kind of advance their own political lineage.
Personal attacks, yeah.
Yes. But also what's happening in the world, in addition to Belize, and what always impacts Belize, is the banking crisis in the United States. It's not really a crisis, but the failure of two major banks that could signal more trouble ahead. We remember the last time Lehman failed. It was 7 or 8 months later when the whole thing came tumbling down. I'm not saying that's going to happen again, because
Make we get to that eventually. And I want to stick with the budget for a minute first. And granted that you're over there, so you'll probably get the news about it a little later on.
Yes.
What I found deplorable, and I've seen it too often, these people who get paid to attend one meeting a month cannot make that meeting. Sister B hasn't been in the House since she got elected, and I thought there was a rule that you have to be you can't miss 5 consecutive, something like that, a certain amount that you're supposed to be in there. Patrick Farber was not in the House. Shine gave a speech for about 2 hours and then packed up his books and left. The Prime Minister got up while the leader of the opposition was speaking and went outside to address some protesters outside of the House. I think that I want disrespect to the people who pay them well, and they get a good salary. These people do, plus perks and packages that would make a rich man jealous. I don't, as far as what the debate is about, yes, that just you may do this, and how when you do this, we never do this, and when women today this, and a whole lot of stats that don't match up to what they say, and we don't get a good sense of what is happening.
Yeah, we don't get a debate on the issues and the facts. We don't get into
not even the figures that they present makes any sense at all. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, that's a point well made, Mr. Chair. That in terms of respect for process and respect for the electorate, I found that the leader of the opposition kind of departing. I saw, I believe the gentleman from the north get up. I kind of tuned out in the sense that I had some other obligation. So I don't know that the guy from the north returned, but from what you're saying, obviously the leader of the opposition did not return. I didn't see the prime minister kind of electing to take a break.
Yeah.
But either way, I believe that the people of Belize deserve much more respect.
Yeah.
I believe the budget debate is really a stage where both sides would have their chance of basically informing the nation what their vision and mission is in relation to the various exigencies facing the nation. For example, Mr. Chair, one of the issues that two issues that I've seen really. The Prime Minister made a claim that the debt to GDP ratio, and I know Mr. Morrison, this is right up his street, the debt to GDP ratio since taking office in 2020 has been reduced dramatically. There has been utterings in the wings that, well, it's really creative accounting. Long story short, I did some research on Google, Google specialist, and what Google is saying is that yes, the debt to GDP ratio went from 91%, meaning that out of every dollar what the country earned, the GDP, you own 91 cents out of that. It went from 91 cents, I believe, to 70 odd cents, which is significant.
Yeah.
And what you would want to do in a budget debate is to say that given this closure of the debt to GDP ratio, what it is that you will do for development. But at least the portion of the debate that I saw, that did not happen. Um, as you know, Mr. Chair, and gentle people, I'm the part of a political party, and we will need to do a written response to the budget. So it's more than just me being here. Given this little opportunity to say what I need to say, I believe that the budget um, is obviously national in scope, and whether you want to agree or not, it does impact almost every aspect of our lives, whether you talk about roads or school or healthcare or foreign affairs, Guatemala, it does impact. And I believe that the public in and of itself should take more interest in terms of engaging on the budget. I think that for most people, it's just an accounting exercise and they get turned off. But I believe that especially the interest groups, the chamber, the unions, political parties, the church, etc., should be making representations, i.e., they should be submitting their positions uh, uh, in writing, if nothing else, in terms of how they see the budget, because it does impact their circumstances and the quality of life generally of our people. No.
Let me say welcome to Joe. Are you in, Joe? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
All right. It's funny that George is coming like that because he sounding a lot like you, who was stressing earlier to me the need for participatory democracy and people being involved because of how significant the budget is to our way of life.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're saying, George. And unfortunately, many people find it boring.
Yeah.
I found it even boring today, especially when they started throwing out figures that did not correspond, apparently. And everybody has their own idea of what the budget should be and what it should be doing. To me, a more opportunity to grandstand and to cast aspersions on the other side But you, I think you see more than that. What did you see today that kind of like struck a chord there with you?
Well, if you allow me to just quickly put in perspective what I believe the budget is, which is effectively one of the most, if not the most, important instrument to effect a government policy, the Appropriation Act. Now, I think that what is extremely important for all of us in listening to a budget is to try to make a determination as to whether indeed the budget is fulfilling those commitments. My perspective of the budget, in listening to it today, in reading it, I have been through the whole budget, and I can say that any non-aligned partisan cursory look at the budget, non-aligned in the sense that you are not in any way partisan driven, and to give an analysis based on your partisan ideology. No, you can do it as a non-aligned perspective. This budget to me has a lot of merits to it. It does. And to quickly, I would put it that when you look at the social and economic indicators and the financial indicators, the GDP, I mentioned a few, the GDP, the poverty alleviation, the deficits in the budget, the GDP, the debt itself. If you look at those main indicators, what we call the more macro type indicators, I would say that the budget evidently contributed to the positive results that we are seeing in those indicators. I look at things in it overall quickly, and I see some policy investment proposals that will be codified into law. For example, the expenditure management, bridging the digital divide through moving towards e-government. And I can go on and mention about the medium-term development strategy, which was very much in the budget in terms of financing the medium-term development strategy. But not to take it long, because this could be a whole 2 hours discussion.
I know. It could be longer than Shine's speech.
That's
I
what
wanted to.
it's hard to discuss a budget in such a short time. But let me come down now to tell you that after looking at all those things, I would say on the face of it, the budget have merits to it. But it's when you go in to more analyzing it in depth, you can see some failures that evidently needs a lot of improvement. One, let's look at the issue of accountability to citizens through the internal controls, which is the audit. For years now, the public expenditures and the budget have not been audited, which is a requirement of the Constitution. So to me, that is a serious deficit that I would see in terms of budget, and this one is no exception. Secondly, I think the budget in itself is not addressing the need for right-sizing the public sector and to implement more training in terms of the human resource aspect of it. The public sector evidently is one of the main, again, implementers for the Appropriation Act. And if you cannot begin to take serious measures to right size and to train and bring back all the fundamentals for a public sector, that is a serious deficit. So, in a nutshell, I see good in it at the face of it. But of course, to begin to go into the diagnosis of the budget in depth, it will take us hours. 3 days they will take you might to debate it. We
I
are
know.
in half an hour or less.
I know that I watched some of it today at your behest. No, listen. Tell me something though, because I hear you and you seem favorable towards it. Given though your background coming from the People's United Party, would that in any way influence your determination here, or are you really looking at this? And had you looked at a UDP budget of the same quality, would you have felt the same way about it?
You might, I think one of the mistakes we tend to make, we do not judge a government simply by the depth that it came from. We need to judge it by the height they achieved with the resources they have at their disposal. So if you try to take the PUP today and compare it with the UDP of 13 years, I would say that evidently the PUP has stopped digging the hole. But now the question is that if you judge it by the depth that it comes from, it's very successful. But if you try to judge it by what you think that the legitimate expectation of 2 years, that's 2 years or 3 years, you can find some failures in it. And that's what I don't want to compare, because if you compare the 2 years of PUP with 13 years of UDP, I don't think it's a fair comparison.
Would you say they're on the right track? You think they're on the right track to bringing the country out of the hole that it was in, which was obviously was in a hole, and move it forward to more positive
All
days ahead?
economic and financial and social indicators are telling us that evidently they have made some improvement and they have stopped digging the hole for sure. And they have made progress in trying to get out of the hole. But I think at the end of the day, our assessment of the government is not to compare with the previous. That's no benchmark for us. We must set our benchmark based on what we expect of a government to do anyone. We, the people, must set the benchmark, and then we must determine how much they have achieved towards that benchmark.
George?
I believe that, to the credit of the Prime Minister and his group, and I mentioned this on the show before, but not in the context of the national budget debate. There was in the waning days of the previous administration, the then Prime Minister made utterances to the effect that would be handed the current administration. And I believe that it was a recognition that the state of the economy that would have been inherited by the current Prime Minister and his administration was dire. I also did mention that I was in a conversation with an ex-minister of the previous administration and a fairly learned gentleman that is a known quantum for the PUP. And we're just having a sober conversation outside one of the banks. And basically, the thoughts of the ex-UDP minister was that he gave Mr. Briceño not more than 10 months before everything would come falling down around his neck. And I must say that, to his credit, Mr. Briceño has recruited
Hold on, George.
The Minister of State.
George, we're getting a terrible feedback here from somewhere.
I'm hearing.
George, that might. Okay, that's Gregory. I think Gregory just muted his mic. It seems there's a blowing something. It's blowing. They're gonna fan on there, or is it the wind that blow through the window, Greg? But anyway, that obviously was it. Sorry, George, but we weren't hearing you.
Yeah. So I'm saying that, to his credit, I was very, very happy, and I hear the squeaking again. I was very, very happy with, for example, when he brought in Minister Kowe and some other minister that eludes me right now, 2 ministers of state that are very learned people. Well, Iman, but there was somebody else. It wasn't Iman that I was thinking of. But to his credit, he also brought in very, very learned and competent people at the level of the CEOs. And I can see where wise counsel is probably taking hold. Because although the execution has not been perfect, because there's a policy of government and there's a politics of government. I think that if you look at the policy of government, then the showing would have been better. But there's a politics of it also, and obviously I can't fault anybody for the politics of it. If you look, for example, at the issue of employment, the employment figures are down. And Joe has basically said, well, you can't compare or maybe we shouldn't compare both administrations, but I would say that perforce we would need to, not necessarily in terms of the usual PUP, UDP diatribe, but in terms of time. If you look at unemployment now versus 4 years ago, there are legitimate cases to be made that since the Prime Minister and his government took office, there has been some marked improvement in certain sectors. We're just coming out of COVID. There's the Ukraine war, etc., that is impacting this small little economy. And I believe that they have done a decent job. My concern in terms of let me say, within the budget, there are certain areas that are well funded. For some reason, the police is well funded. I would like to see the primary productive sectors that have been traditionally not adequately funded being funded. For example, if you look at agriculture, I can recall old Mr. Freddie Hunter, what we would say in Creole, God bless the dead, in his past, he said that when he was minister back in the day, the contribution of the national budget to agriculture was 14%. That's an indicator that you're serious about agriculture development. If you look, for example, at some of the other areas such as fisheries, I'm biased there, but obviously if there are more investment going into fisheries from the government coffers and otherwise, there's some excellent work being done there in terms of the blue economy approach, but there's a minimum investment that the government needs to make. And I don't want to go into where those investments should be made at this point, apart from saying that if you look at fisheries, one of the issues with fisheries, it's in crisis right now. It's an area where employment is created, especially in terms of licensed fishers. But the more fishers that you have, the greater the chance that you are headed down the road of unsustainable fisheries is there. And so investment needs to be made there in terms of diversification within that industry. But, I won't go into, obviously, this is not the place to go into where areas of investment can be made from within the context of the budget. But I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the top achievement end of it, I would give the government a 5. And I would give them a 5 because I am a very severe scorer. When I was teaching, if you made 60%, you're a pretty good student. So they're doing a fairly decent job. For improvements.
There's one thing though. When we get down to the bread and butter issue, we talk about inflation. I used to pay $72 for a bag of dog food. It's now $140. I used to pay 60 cents for a small can of evap milk. It's now $100.35. When we look at the cost of things that are going up, the budget does not speak to that. I am not. I know all the terms and whatnot, and the people who are more versed in economics, like Joe and yourself. You could look at the other indicators and figure, well, maybe we could live with that one day. But for most people on the ground, that the one where we really can't live with that high inflation. And all the wonderful figures are good as to unemployment figures and whatnot. And are they really padded? Or is it really an improvement coming and hope for the future? What do you think?
Well, sorry. My view of it, Mike and gentlemen, is that there's an Institute of Statistics that does these figures. And so, if nothing else, there should be consistency in terms of the methodologies and in terms of the coverage. There's this thing that said you could lie with statistics. Well, I believe that once the Institute of Statistics maintains what I call the objective science of doing what it does, then you would have to say that that improvements have been made in terms of the labor statistics.
Yeah. Joe.
Um,
I, I think I can be identified as ideologically aligned with the People's United Party, and I have no apology for that. I understand why I am anchored in that philosophy of, I would say, a both side of the Black solidarity. But I will not be lulled into complacency simply by putting too many laurels. I believe that the government is on the right track. I've stopped digging the hole and getting us out of it. I think it's on the right track in trying to take the resources of this country, develop it, and have some sort of equitable distribution of it for shared prosperity of the people of this country. But I think, like, it's not that you love Caesar less, but that you love Rome more. So it's not that I don't align myself with the ideology of the People's United Party. I do, but that was the purpose of the benefit for the country. So I think I have an obligation as a citizen of this country to make sure that this government and any government for that matter will be getting us the best bang out of the dollar. Therefore, I would say that there are some areas that I think that they will need to be addressed to really take us to this so-called promised land. And evidently, the public sector will need to be addressed in terms of the right sizing of it, in terms of enforcing accountability, in terms of compliance with the Finance and Audit Reform Act, in terms of compliance with all these internal controls. I think that the government needs to play a greater part in terms of, I see some moves being made through the MSME and through fiscal incentive to help go towards industrialization. Again, my economic philosophy on it is let the government lead the way through major investment and industrialization of the country. So I think my job as a citizen, and although ideologically aligned with the two, is to make sure that those doctrines and tenets that I subscribe to will in fact be achieved.
Gentlemen,
Uh,
there's a report, human rights report that was just released. It was on the news last night, and it basically says, I don't want to be like, I'm not going to read a whole thing here for you, like so, a friend. Significant human rights issues included credible reports of abuse and inhuman treatment by security and prison officers, arbitrary arrests and detentions, refoulement of refugees to countries where they would face threats to their lives and freedom, serious corruption by government officials, and substantial barriers to accessing sexual and reproductive health services. Now, this, the Mandamnin indictment, the rest of it goes even further, pointing out to some abuses by the security forces and whatnot. Uh, The budget might not be a time for that, but I've spoken recently some healthcare workers, and Joe, this is your area also, that is suggesting that we're woefully lacking as far as the supplying of medical needs, even bandages, regular things that they use on a regular basis. Did we get enough in the budget to make up the shortages in the health services?
And that's an area again that I would like to have differences with the budget. I accept that there is a need for capital investment, and the cap two and the cap three certainly go over 300 million. But I believe that we could be slowing down now in terms of infrastructure development for roads, etc. And I think we need to shift some of that funds more into social and human capital development. The present government, yes, certainly had condemned the previous government when they said that infrastructure will be the mantra. And they were spending millions and millions, which to my mind, there was a sinister motive behind it. So when you look at the budget again, and that's an area that I'd certainly like to see that they reduce on some of that infrastructure, that physical infrastructure of roads, and shift some of it to more human capital development, like in the health services, education, which to me is the most important input for human capital development. So those are areas, again, I mean, I would agree that I'd like to see some shifting more from that kind of capital investment in infrastructure and more the capital investment in human resource development.
Yeah, I see Shine touched on a few of those things. Though for the most part, I felt he was more grandstanding than anything else. No, he wasn't making any um, serious contribution. He talked a lot, and he said a lot, but I don't know that he addressed the core points of the budget as such. Um,
Uh,
if we can move on, because Gregory, I want to drag Gregory into this. Gregory is a bit concerned about the failures of those banks in the
but,
United
but,
States.
but, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I just wanted to make one point, and then, with your permission, then we move on to Gregory.
Yeah, man.
I identify with the fact that what Joe is saying is that there could be a reordering of the financial resources of the government. And he did mention the social sector, but I would also say the natural resource sectors, as I said earlier, would also need to be dealt with. And to your point, Mr. Chair, that I guess the human rights report, um, you're saying that it's damning, but my view is that, well, believes relative to who and relative to what, you know. Um, we're not perfect there in terms of human rights, but I think that in terms of the region, in terms of Central America and perhaps the Caribbean, unless I see otherwise, I think that we're doing fairly decent with the resources that we have and with the problems that face us. No other Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean country is faced with the refugee crisis or the immigrant crisis that faces Belize. You see, so I think that you have to examine the broader context in which those statements may be made. Again, Mr. Chair, I don't think that anything is off limits in terms of the budget, because government does have a ministry responsible for refugees. And obviously, one could examine the resources, the staffing, etc., and the policies going there that could be a part of the budget debate. To your point, again, Mr. Chair, I believe that Mr. Barrow, leader of the opposition, did a fairly decent job in terms of getting into the retail level aspect. That, rice was this cost, and then beef was this cost, etc. I think he ought to be given some stripes and accolade for pointing out what the problems are. But I believe where he fell short is in terms of probably saying, now that we have the problem, this is where the fix ought to be, and this is what I am seeing and not seeing in the budget. That is where it's falling short. I am hoping that as the debate continues over the next couple of days, I believe that the opposition will make a better go at their analysis and critique of the budget. No.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems that Shine is basically out there by himself, and he needs the help of his colleagues to lock heads with him and get get some substance prepared. Sam was asking, where can the budget be read? Joe, I believe you were telling me the government press office does put that out, doesn't it?
Yes, they do.
So they have a website, Sam,
Yeah.
that you will go to.
I actually found it on Google, Mr. Chairman.
All right, good. Wonderful.
So, it's available.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wonder if you would allow me maybe just on 30 seconds to comment on the leader of the opposition, rebutting the budget today, I would first say that I think he was quite articulate in communicating to the public his opinions of the budget. And I think there were some areas that he spoke on which I think we should not ignore. I thought that they were very salient and important and pertinent. But I think that he may have felt share. Maybe this is not his present obligation to look for the solutions. But I think that overall, I think he did a good job against, what, 1 or 5 against 26. And on the matter of that report that you referred to, Mr. Chairman, that came from the human
rights.
Yeah, somehow when I read what I read, that or the abridged version of it, I think that perception was not properly evidence-based. I don't think there was much substance to the perception of this negative report of corruption, etc. I think it was somewhat unfair to the police.
Right, but do you really think that they're off the mark in suggesting that corruption is so out of control? I mean, don't you believe that corruption is to a bad way, in Belize?
No, I am not saying that it may not be corruption. I am saying that when you're giving a report and you are making, let's say, allegations, not accusation. Well, sorry, let's say you are making allegations in this kind of reports. I think you're supposed to be able to bring some kind of evidence to substantiate the allegation. The report spoke of corruption, and I think that I didn't say there is corruption, but I would have expected when the report, it's not for me to tell you that I believe there is corruption. It's for the report to give evidence to support the accusation.
But in fairness, I only read one line. It even goes to referring to a certain incident that we all remember, where a young man was locked up in a police van and died from heat stroke. A terrible way to die. And when you think about that, that in itself, and they pointed out a couple of different different crimes, different incidents that showed a lack of good governance, to put it lightly.
I would say that there was not some evidence given.
Yeah.
I thought that, in fact, I think I kind of aligned myself in this case along with I think it is Jude Vasquez. I thought he was giving the same kind of opinion on the report. In other words, allegations are made, perspectives are given. The report, to me, should have brought forward some more evidence to support the allegations being made, coming from the source that it came from, though. But well, if you were to ask, well, is this true or is that not true? Fine, I could agree or disagree on that. But if you look at that, what was given to us, as I saw, as you rightly said, maybe you'll have to go into the whole details of the report.
Right.
I give you some credence or some credibility in making the same observation, that he thought that there was not sufficient substance.
I caught that, but I wonder if he wasn't downplaying a very serious report. It kind of like he was dismissive of it, but when you read the report, they are making specific points that we all remember as occurring. We've seen it happen. It says that the government, what do you say? Officials often engage in corrupt practices with impunity. I don't think that anybody in Belize would look at that and say, "Boy, that's not true." That what they just they pull that out of the thin air. And maybe I'm being too harsh in thinking that you guys are being too soft on this. But I think that's something that we need to look at. We have a long way to go as far as corruption is concerned. Corruption in public office is really out of control.
So, I fully agree with them. I fully agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I was just commenting on that part of the report that was made available. I think it was with the courtesy of you partly, and I felt that indeed that the accusations are very serious accusations. Yeah. And I'm not saying that there is no merits to the accusations, but I would have wanted and expected the report to give more evidence to the allegations.
Yeah. All right. Let's go on. Make we finally get to this banking thing with Gregory, because how will it affect Belize? Gregory, give Ali rundown. Well, I understand that two major banks. Huh? Your mic might be off. Check it before you start the talk.
Yes, yes. Yeah, two major banks. One of the biggest one was the Silicon Valley Bank. Um, they had some problems and with their liquidity, and it kind of scared people that had made deposits that was above what the FDIC would have normally supported through their insurance policies, because I think that goes up to $250,000, and a lot of the Silicon Valley firms that held millions of dollars in in that bank, to deal with their operating expenses, for payrolls and things like that. So they may have a couple million or few $1 million in that bank. They got scared when the banks start um, having fatigue issues with liquidity, and so they start wanting to withdraw their money, and they were fearful that it would cause a run on the bank. So the Treasury and the FDIC and them stepped in and said, "Hey, we'll take care of you. We'll guarantee the money to the
I saw that.
secured
Yeah.
holders, which was the 250,000 limit, and we'll even go step further and guarantee the money for all depositors. So even those big depositors that had millions of dollars in the bank. So that kind of eased that stress, and then I think the bank got turned over to some other banking institution. So what I think they said happened was the the investors in that bank lost their money, but none of the depositors, either the small depositors or the large depositors, lost any of their money. But
Yeah.
what happened last time, I think 2008, was the same thing with Lehman Brothers, and it was 6 7 months later that they had the real meltdown in the banking crisis. So we don't think it will be a repeat, I was saying, of the same to occur this time, but
Yeah.
it raised caution to all of us. And I just wondered how the banks in Belize and how the central bank of Belize is looking at this, and how are they preparing all local banks, because the issue is, they said, was brought on by the inflation and the constant well, the Fed's trying the government trying to deal with the inflation and constantly raising the interest rate.
Right.
The
Right.
U.S.
Right.
central bank just constantly raising interest rate, and that kind of squeeze the assets of those marginal banks already, because banks are limited in how they earn money, right? They have interest, whatever fees and fines they get from their customers, and some of them are allowed to have some type of investments, and those are basically the ways. So they operate on very thin margins. um, in Belize, I'm not quite sure how they all earn their money, but but it, it 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 does put strain on them as the cost of doing business goes up higher and higher, and their liquidity gets squeezed, and the ratio of what they have in terms of reserve. So that
Well,
was my concern.
apparently, whatever the Feds did was enough to avert whatever run on the bank that might have triggered more runs. I think that it shows how volatile the whole system is there.
It
That
is. It is.
that
But the issue, the thing is, how many banks are sitting on that same little?
right, that
Yes,
ledge
yes.
that can be pushed
How,
over.
how many of them are right there? But I think the fact that the Fed acts so fast, the Treasury Department acted so fast,
Yeah.
gives a lot of ease to the fact that they'll not let the individual bank and investors fall over the cliff.
Yeah, they were able to give confidence to the investors or the depositors anyway.
But it
Some
didn't stop. It didn't stop the Treasury Department from raising interest rate yet again today. You
well,
know.
that's it. I mean, and I, you wonder sometimes they know they go in a different directions, no?
It seems like they are, but they're looking to then at a bigger issue, right?
Yeah,
It's the interest rate to fight inflation, i- upcharge to fight inflation, and not raising it and keeping the banks in a individual way. But I think in the United States they say they have over 4,000 different chartered banks. So it's a very diverse. It's a lot of banks and
a lot of money.
a lot of money, a
A
lot of
lot of
money.
money. Sam says, Gregory, we know that the executives sold their shares just before the bank went under, and the feds are looking into that right now. Did you
Oh,
hear
I
anything
didn't
of
know
that?
that. I
Yeah,
didn't. I didn't
see?
know that. I know that. I know that the ones that the investors lost their money. But yeah, if the executives sold their shares, there would be some criminal charges against them because that would be considered what we call insider trading.
Yeah, took advantage of knowledge that they saw it coming and
Yes,
bailed out.
yes, yes, yes.
Which is what would have precipitated the fall anyway. Because I'm
Well,
sure they
that
had.
doesn't really.
You
Well,
don't think so?
it could have because it have said that people
But
kept
certainly
their cash.
accelerated. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It have said even the owners don't have the confidence in that the bank is doing the right, is on the right stable condition.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, we're midway through our show. We want to remind people that we're doing something here to try and address issues, pertinent issues. We're also to try get this gap between Belizeans at home and Belizeans abroad narrowed in whatever small way we can. There are some costs to it, and you see something running on your screen there. We're asking that if anybody feels generous enough to give us a lead contribution, check with CY. He has a cash app and a sale thing there, and we're trying to keep this show up and running and growing. So we want to thank those who tune in on a regular basis, even those who watch it on the replay, because it can be seen on YouTube. All the shows are on there. And certainly we have Facebook pages that are showing the show in real time. Folks, if you got any comments to make, you can do that. Um, we will put it on the screen, we'll read it off, and we'll have the guys to do it. Janice Jacobs Palmer says, good night to all. Good night, Janice. Thanks for tuning in. From the rest of us, the panel here, we want to say thanks for
Yeah.
joining
I, I
us.
I wanted to say one thing about the budget and the seriousness of just back up a little bit, the budget and the seriousness of how people should be, not people, but how we believe the parliamentarians should be taking it, either whether they're on the government side or on the opposition side. And I believe that it will not become a serious issue until it becomes a must part of the curriculum for primary and high school students to listen to the budget. Not until that becomes part of the class curriculum to listen to it, the parliamentarians will continue to act in that manner. I believe if it becomes a requirement, they will start conducting themselves and preparing themselves for true national debate on those issues that we were talking about, and not step out of the house and not um, bring flimsy, comments
Yeah.
across to each other.
I noted
Uh,
that a particular school was present there today, and
Yeah.
that maybe they should do that. Take some of the schools in for on field trips now, and
Yeah.
certainly cover it in school.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It should be
Yeah, yeah,
broadcast, and the school children should
yeah.
should be
Discuss
should,
it
it should be
themselves. Yeah,
it should be part of their curriculum to listen to it during the live debate.
and maybe have mock budgets themselves that give
Right.
them idea what's going on. George, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I would go beyond, and I know perhaps Gregory didn't perhaps intended to limit that suggestion to just primary school, but I think academia in general needs to be engaged. Um, I believe definitely at the sixth form, high school sixth form, and university level, um, there needs to be some focus perhaps within the curriculum where the issue of the national budget is made a part of the mainstream academic response. I think it's a point well made. Just doubling back, um, Gregory, as you've said, my source of info, or what my main source of info in relation to things economical, is Professor Wolf. I believe it's Wolf. I
Oh
could be wrong,
yes,
but it's
okay.
Professor Wolf. I believe that he's still a lecturer at Harvard. It could be, but definitely one of the Ivy League schools. He has basically said that um, nobody is aware. Well, it's not anybody, but John Q. Public is not aware of how deep the banking issue is that saw these banks, I guess, collapse. He feels that there's a systemic issue built into the financial system, the overall financial architecture of the United States, where every 6 to 7 years is a major hiccup. And so, my question to you, Greg, since this would be in your area of competence, is to what extent do you believe that the issue has been throttled and there's really no implications going forward for a kind of broader banking, let me say, hiccup to take
Well,
hold here? And I don't know that you kind of uh, uh, address the issue of how it may impact not only the budget but the Belizean economy. I don't know that you have dealt with that.
yeah, yeah. Well, generally, I believe that there are lots of potential banks that sits on the same slope that Silicon Valley banks sit on throughout the United States. There are lots of them. Um, and so the potential of things getting worse is there because we go through a period where these bankers, and because the way the system is set up, they're able to take so much money out of the system themselves in the good days, and there's nothing in reserve. They either take it in terms of large salaries or shares or things like that, and there's very little that is left in reserve beyond what is generally required to maintain their operating license, right? And so whenever a crisis comes, and they will show up, and like you said, they occur at these seem to be regular intervals, then there's nothing there to bounce back on and to drag to cover it. And then they look to the general public, the US government, the Treasury Department, and us as the
Bail
people
them out.
to take care of it. So it will always be there. If we could soften it and if they could prepare it in some ways that it doesn't quite happen, and the people, the general public doesn't get nervous and react in some ways that cause problem for it, then it will continue to flow until something bigger comes and push it, and eventually probably something will. How it affects beliefs, whenever something happens here, it rattles beliefs, and in ways it does in funding and in loans and things that beliefs would be able to make from banks here. It affects how our corresponding banking would operate, right? Because a lot of times the banks that we are working with are not the bigger banks recently, but some of the more smaller banks. So it will certainly create limitations to how we're able to make money flow between Belize and the United States and get those type of financial transaction carried out. So it will affect us, but exactly how it will, I'm not sure. But because of just the nature of how money flows and the whole global economy interacts, it will have some effect on Belize, and usually it's not going to be. We're going to pay a heavier cost for it somewhere down the road.
Well, we can't print our money. So, Joe, you had any input on the whole banking situation and the route is going there in the US?
Well, I was monitoring the issue in the US, especially with the Silicon banks. And I think what had happened from it, like investors generally, the executives went out to invest the depositors' money. And banks invest first into loans, but they also invest into other instruments, into bonds, stocks, etc. I think in the case of the Silicon Valley banks, I thought that they sort of relented on the prudential rules that banks should do in investing the people's deposits. And they went on the edge and they were buying up bonds, plus they was lending out money, and the ratio became very high of what was outstanding to the deposits. You know, the central bank in Belize and all over the world, in the United States, the federal government, they restrict the amount that you can lend out. You have to keep back a certain amount of the reserve. That Silicon Valley Bank, those executives there were prepared to take the risk. And what happened when they did the audit and the financial statements came to the notice of certain depositors? They were not pleased with what they saw because the audit was properly done and independently done. And when they saw what was happening, they thought that the risk was too high. And they begin to pull out. When they begin to pull out their deposits, and the bank tried to sell the receivables that they had from other instruments, the prices of those had gone down. So the bank couldn't get the liquidity to meet the demand. And that's what really caused it to go under. So evidently, other banks capitalized during that period because the FDIC, they guarantee up to 250,000 per account. So other banks capitalized by increasing interest on deposits to bring the small depositors into their banks. So to me, what happened with the Silicon Valley Bank, and then it will spread into other banks. That is, whenever they begin to relent at the prudential rules and take too high risk in investing depositors' money, that is where the risk is. Now, look at the Belize situation. Belize has an excess liquidity right now, but it's almost about almost 800 million, and 500 million of that is in cash. So we have an excess liquidity. But if you look on the non-performing loans in the Belize situation, the non-performing loans are itching up. And they are itching up, yes, because whereas they are not lending a high percentage of the deposits, because of, if you look at the excess liquidity, I mean, with almost $1 billion in excess liquidity, that's pretty high. So to me, I think in the case of the Belize situation, evidently anything happen globally in terms of the economy, it can affect Belize. Because if it affects our economy, it means the borrowers might not be able to honor the loans. And once the loans become non-performing, it puts banks in trouble. But our situation right now is that we have a high excess liquidity. And yes, the non-performing loans went up. And the central bank now is being alerted to look closely now at the commercial banks here, because we are commercial banks, we are not development banks. So we can only do short-term lending. But some of the banks lend as though they are development banks when they are just commercial banks. So I would say that what happened in America, what triggered what happened with those banks, is different from the situation in Belize. But to the extent that it affects the global economy, of course it can affect Belize if the economy goes upside down. and the borrowers cannot make the payments, then it can trigger it.
Well,
Excess liquidity for a bank, though, is still not a good thing because it means it's not performing and earning interest
not working the
on
money.
the
They're not
capital
working the money.
sitting there. So
No, it
that
is.
that too is not a good thing. But I know when you, like you said, they have already so much unperforming loan, then you have a hard place to space to place that money, and it creates some concerns about making further lending decisions.
Eh, I would agree with you that the excess liquidity is nothing positive. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, what it has done, it forced them to widen the spread
Mhm.
because the excess liquidity is sterilized. But then they have to give some interest. And in Belize, the weighted average right now in interest is about maybe 1.5, which is low. But if you are lending at an average right now in Belize of 8.9, look at the spread. So when you have such high excess liquidity, it's not good for you. It's not good.
Mhm.
So it forced the bank to widen the spread so that they can get a reasonable return for administrative costs and profits. And that is what is happening in the Belize case now. The excess liquidity is there simply because the bank doesn't want to take some of the risks that they used to take and they are holding back. Last year, they relented a bit and loans went up. But still, the excess liquidity is there and the interest rate remains high because of the deposits that are sterilized. Some of that deposit still have to be paid. If they're 1.5 or 2, they have to pay. But then the
Um,
ones then that are low down, that is where they get back that amount and they have to spread it among the total deposit.
right.
Mhm.
Do these?
So I just wanted to ask, in terms of the role of the central bank to monitor and regulate, how would you rate their performance um, relative to the banks that they do regulate, which I guess is a national. You use the word spread. It's kind of national scope that they have.
I, I think that the central bank has done pretty good in terms of supervising and regulating the commercial banks. If you look at the quarterly reports, which of course comes out from the central bank of the commercial banks, which they have to provide to the central banks, and then the public can have a look at the quarterly reports to see how the banks are performing. Right now, I, in fact, if you look in the Prime Minister's speech, it is saying he's citing some of the issues of the banks right now with the excess liquidity and with the non-performing loans. But again, he put a lot of support and stability into the IMF, and he believes, like the IMF, that the central bank has the instrument and is quite capable now, it's within its capability to control those non-performing loans and to try to bring it down. So I would say that the central bank, as a regulator, has been doing pretty good in the case of Belize.
Wonderful. All right, guys. Maybe we'll move on to Sunny. But let me read this first that somebody put up. U.S. banks can do overnight borrowing from other banks, which keep them solvent. Also, because Signature Bank failed, it makes the bank in Switzerland fail. Is there a connection there?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, Credit Suisse failed and had to be sold, but I think
Interesting.
they had
Yeah.
some more serious problems.
But then again,
Um,
you also stated a figure there of the amount of banks in the U.S. and two out of that amount. That's
Yeah,
not a hell of a lot,
yeah,
actually. So,
we have 4,000. We have at least 4,000 chartered banks in the United States.
though this was a very big one, I believe that the
Yeah,
second biggest bank or
yeah,
um,
something like that.
Credit Suisse. Credit Suisse.
Yeah.
It's one
Does
of
it
the.
what
affect credit unions the same way? One, Major, sorry about that.
Yeah,
Uh,
the credit unions are also governed by the rules of the central bank in Belize.
I see. George, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I wanted to ask both Joe and Gregory about the blue bond. My understanding is that the arrangement between the government of Belize, TNC, the Nature Conservancy, in terms of allowing the GOB to restructure its debt. Um, the Swiss bank, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, was a part of that, was the institution that was involved. But Joe, I don't know if you have been following the one to that extent, or I just kind of misread that Swiss bank was involved. And if it was, then the question then becomes, how might that affect the Belize scenario, the Belize situation, in terms of its debt, the EBT
I
of
would
debt.
I would think that when a bank acts as that, they act as an agent with, again, with other banks, right? And so
Okay.
their role is just a part to bring whatever instrument they have. They may have a
Yeah.
certain set of lenders, and then there are some lenders in the United States, and they come together and they say, we'll package all this as the blue bond. So
Okay.
now it's packaged as the blue bond. It's no longer a part of that bank instrument any longer. It's a new package. Where it's held or how it's managed now, which bank, I'm not sure if it was still in that particular Swiss bank or if it had moved to a US or a Cayman bank. But
Okay.
it doesn't change it. Their failure would not change whatever agreement was made
Okay.
and must be carried out now, um,
Okay.
by Belize. But one of the good benefits that the Belize government had, and the Briseño administration, were in the liquidity ratio going down from 71 to 51, as you had said. I think that's the number you had used, George.
Well, it came down from 91 to, I guess, 70 to
71.
70 odd percent, the
Okay,
debt to
okay.
GDP
Well,
ratio.
yeah, that was because the debt we had reduced. So that was good fortune for Belize, with probably not having to lose any equity. We did not have to lose, we did not have to pay it. We did not have to pay it from our tax resources and things like that. It did not affect our GDP in terms of paying that loan, that portion of that loan back by negotiating the blue bond. I have one concern always about the blue bond, and any such agreement that we sign in the future, that when we put um, or assets on reserves like that, that it always be set for a time period where it expired. I don't believe the blue bond had an expiration period. And I don't know what happens if we go back and want to reclaim some of these resources for exploitation in the future. And while I agree extensively in conservation and preservation and all that, I believe that the resources of our land is there for our utilization and our wise utilization. And so if there comes a necessity to exploit that for our development, we should have the opportunity to do that for the people, maybe not for today, but for Belizeans in the future. And so I am always concerned about any government that would commit for some unforeseeable time the resources of the nation. And so I have a little bit of reservation about the blue bond in that regard.
Is the blue bond deferred? Somebody's saying that they thought it was deferred, as far as you know.
No, not that as far as I
Well,
know.
Gregory, maybe you could explain this as a layman on this subject. My understanding is that the arrangement made by TNC was that they bought the debt to a certain extent, and the government of Belize is now obligated, in terms of dollar for dollar, we're now obligated, I think, 55 or 56 cents on the dollar. That's my understanding of it. So effectively, the debt has been reduced. I don't know if I have that right, but that's my understanding of it. Um, you know.
Joe, you got any idea where to go on with that?
Yeah, the blue band was used to refinance with a haircut the super bond. That's what it did only.
Right.
It was just,
So
a matter of fact, it was believed that the Petrocaribe funding, which was at a very, very low, maybe about 2% interest, should have been used at the time to refinance the super bond.
Which would have made a lot of sense, don't you
Right,
think?
but that didn't happen. So we
Yeah.
fortunately were able to get the blue bond. And I think the haircut was maybe, I think they got like 56 cents on the dollar, which made a tremendous cut into the debt. The
But
blue
don't
bond,
we
Petrocaribe forgiveness of fund was what made a deep cut into
we
the debt to
still
bring it down to so low, 64% of the GDP.
don't we still owe a substantial amount to that Petrocaribe
Yeah,
scheme though?
we owe them everything we had owed them.
We owe them,
We owe
but
them like over.
albeit at a low percentage.
Yeah, I think we owe Petrocaribe probably like $500 million or something like that.
So Petrocaribe has decided to give a reduction on the debt, a tremendous amount. The two things that brought the debt from the 133 to the 64 was the blue bond that was able to finance the haircut for the super bond. And the next one was the reduction in the Petrocaribe debt from 600 odd million to I think about 400 odd million. So we did get a principal reduction on the debt from. And then I think the third one was not that material. I can't remember it right, but that brought down that debt. We were at 133, and to bring down the debt to like 64% in 2 years, evidently, it had to be something big. And the two big things was the blue bond and the Petrocaribe.
But in order to do that, we had to put in reserve so much of our acreage of
Marine
sea
space.
area and
Marine
our
space.
land area in reserve, right?
Right?
Yeah.
That's the price we had to pay.
The marine
Yes.
environment, I believe that the obligation that Belize has is to increase the percentage of marine
15%.
space that is under protection
Right.
by 30%, up to 2030, I believe.
Yeah.
Right? But
Of course,
that needs to be researched properly.
That's,
Yeah.
that's the price we had to pay. We had to increase the area that would end up being the conservation area.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah,
But-
unfortunately, we're still borrowing though.
We'll be back there again sometime. We'll be back at it sometime
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
But Mr. Cowie, what my concern is that I was trying to express was that as we put these areas in the protective conservation, the citizens of the country in the future there may be resources there that would be necessary for part of our national development at that time. How do we retrieve that and gain the right to mine or whatever we need to do, but to exploit those areas to gain the resources that we would then need to make greater development to the country?
But I think that, sorry,
Go ahead.
that was where the critical decision of the country lies. Were we prepared to restrict ourselves to the use of those lands?
Right.
But the use of the land was for conservation. So the risk we are taking that if in the future, for some reason we believe that there's a tremendous amount of, let's say, oil in
Mhm.
those areas. Obviously, we have to forego the exploitation of it. Though that shouldn't be too much of a problem to countries that are looking to move to alternative energy.
Mhm.
But I would say this, that the risk to me was not as high as it may appear. And I think Mr. Myvit would be better than us to be able to give us advice on that, in the sense that the areas that we put under conservation, I think Mr. Myvit is more in the marine areas.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
My understanding that it's almost exclusively marine,
Right.
gentlemen, in the sense that the marine environment is broadly defined. It includes both the aquatic and non-aquatic regime. Non-aquatic to the extent that mangroves, intertidal mangroves, are classified as a part of the marine environment. And so, in terms of ecosystems, it's really the mangroves, seagrass bed, the coral reef, and of course the deep blue sea um, that one has to work with. The tragedy that we have is that as Joby made these or made this commitment to reserve additional space, there's two things that are counterintuitive that are happening. One, we have a regime of an open access fishery, which means that anybody who wishes to fish, that is a national or that is a permanent resident, can fish. And the last statistics that I have goes back about a year ago that says we have about 3,200 licensed commercial fishermen. One of my colleagues basically says that on a weekend, we have an additional 500 recreational fishermen who are not catch and release, but who basically go there and catch fish for to take. Long story short, that as we increase the area for marine reserves, and not only marine reserves in an abstract sense, but the no-take zone, because there are aspects of the marine protected areas that allow for fishing. But a part of the determination that has been entered into by the government of Belize is that the protected areas to a large extent will be no-take. And as you go into no-take areas, it simply means that in a sense you're taking away areas that were traditionally available to fishers. Keeping in mind that a part of the benefits of marine protected areas is there's what we call a spillover effect. Fishes do move, and when they move, they would move in and outside of those protected areas. And when they move outside of the protected areas, then they would be legible to be taken by commercial and recreational fishers. Where I see difficulty, where I see the difficulty is that nobody has really studied or taken into account the impact on the livelihood of fishers. We're in a situation where a number of the species are overharvested or they are at the point of unsustainable harvest. This has not been properly studied, and this is something that the government, I believe, needs to look at very, very seriously, which sort of made me earlier comment that a part of what we need to do, a part of the response need to be, quote unquote, alternative livelihood. Fishers will need to get into fish farming. Fishers will need to get into crop agriculture. Fishers will need to get into livestock agriculture. Fishers will need to get into tourism. That sort of thing has to be planned, and it has to be projectized. But that has not been done. And I believe that this could definitely lead to some crisis in terms of what will happen to our fishers. It's a serious situation. Along those lines, there's some, in my view, some limited scope for deep sea fishing, and I would underscore the term limit as a limited scope, because the Belize water is such that the deep sea is really not productive. Yeah. The productive areas are those areas that are linked to the deep flow reef, the deep flow reef, that's the deep flow reef, and those banks. So you hear about the Grand Bahama banks. Well, actually, Belize does have some sort of productive banks also. Yeah. That would be beyond shallow water regime, which is anything below 300 feet.
One thing we know that you talk fisheries, and you got George.
Yeah. I think the issue. I think the issue though is if it's just for domestic consumption, the fisheries we're talking about, or coastal areas can continue to support that even with those protected areas. If we're talking about export fisheries, then we do need to do what you're saying, Mr. Mivit. That is to start looking at fish farming and things. But I know you are big on tilapia, but I'm always concerned about that fish because of its just the nature of that particular species of fish. It's disease, it's the way it affects the population of other fishes in the environment, and the proper way that might be necessary to keep them within their confines, and probably never will because of the fact that Belize gets hurricane and flooded very frequently and stuff. So those are issues I have with that particular fish farming type of
Yeah.
agenda that you kind of seem to favor.
Yeah. Well, the two things that I would comment on there, Gregory, is that the Belize fishery, the Belize national fishery, can be divided into two areas, two main areas. And these would be the shellfishes, which are your lobster, conch, and crab, various species, obviously, and your finfishes.
Mhm.
The shellfishes, lobster and conch mainly, and to a lesser extent crabs, are mainly destined for the export market. Finfishes, to some extent, or to a large extent, um, is domestic
Yeah.
in terms of domestic consumption, but there's also a significant amount of exportation that goes on. Long story short,
I saw some Belize red snapper at the market for $16.99 a pound. Red
well,
snapper.
there you go. But long story short, the small population of Belize um, does, in a sense, militate that one, whether it's capture fishery or aquaculture, it needs to be the export market that is targeted. There's tremendous scope, and Joe might be able to help me here, should be able to help me here. But obviously, the Maya Rivera, that as far as I know, that runs from Cancun to Chetumal, um, does have a couple million people. It's also a major tourist destination, as you know, and so that is a potential market that is just next door. If we go the route of further fisheries, capture fishery development, and aquaculture development. To your point on tilapia, Greg,
Yeah.
it's the most widely farmed species. It's an invasive species in that it has um, ecological consequences, but it's all over Central America, and in a sense, it has adapted to the British environment, and to the extent that we have a number of the native stocks are still here. So for me, I believe that tilapia, in terms of farming, um, will need to continue to be a part of the set that we farm. But marine shrimp, we are still potentially very competitive in terms of marine shrimp farming, which will get you better returns than tilapia. But the sky's the limit really in terms of aquaculture potentials in Belize.
Just to
If
give some kind of support to the present thinking is that there is a European Economic Forum that was critical of Belize engaging in the blue band, and they criticized us for not doing a more profound cost benefit analysis. They felt that we were going to that kind of instant gratification mindset to hurry reduce the debt, and that much of the projections that we were doing was really not likely to be achieved. I'm
Mhm.
only throwing that out to tell you that indeed that there is still some things that perhaps we need to look at to see how we can alleviate the fallout from the blue one.
Hmm.
No doubt they brought down the debt for us, and we seem to
Yeah.
be
Yeah. Yeah.
happy about that. But there
Yeah.
seems there was far more to it than in terms of the cost. Huh?
Yeah.
The,
Yes.
Yeah.
the
No,
benefit
and
was
that's
too
why I
significant
pointed that
to
out to show
expectation.
that there is some consequences to it that could unfold on us in ways
That's
that we are not aware of.
Yes. There ought to have been a proper cost benefit risk analysis, etc., done in relation to the blue bond, especially on the social on an economic side. It's
and
really
and
for
and
the
what
environmentalists, but
and what
really the social and economic side has not been properly, from a productive standpoint, those have not been properly assessed and taken into account.
Yeah. My concern about it is how any government could go and make such wide-reaching decision without consulting the people on some
Yes.
of what the effects of this would be. That was my concern about it.
And I think that is a very salient
But
concern. I
you
think
know,
that
that's
I think
sorry.
that the government,
Go ahead,
I don't
Joe.
want to say consulting the
Uh-huh.
people, not in any way discrediting the people, but I think that didn't consult the appropriate special interest groups in the country to get a more profound analysis as to whether we should go in this direction or not. And the spin off from it is this, as was cited again by those who were doing the analysis, that the reduction of the debt could cause a government to believe that it is all right now to go and borrow.
Yes.
It gives him that freedom and that space that he can now go and borrow because it has brought it to 64%. And that is one of the criticism I will carry against present government and previous government, is that there's nothing wrong with borrowing and investing. What is wrong is that when you are investing and not doing a proper analysis for the return on that investment. So if you borrow $1 billion and you invest it to get the returns, obviously it's a good investment. But it's important to know what we are investing those millions into. And the freedom and the laxity to which we will be able to do it is because now we say we're at 64%.
Right. Well, Joe, there's also the issue of the commitments and the affordability in relation to the blue bond. For example, the obligation that Belize has with TNC is with the Nature Conservancy is that there needs to be an allocation, I believe, of a minimum of $4 million Belize per annum. I have to research this properly and come back. But there has to be a minimum of $4 million allocated to marine conservation by the government of Belize. Joe, the Fisheries Department total budget is not more than $2 million. And so I believe that the salesmanship in terms of the Blue Band was excellent. And I do not believe that the political decision was driven by any ulterior motive. I just believe that they did not consult deeply enough those stakeholders and those experts, quote unquote, that could have brought some sobriety before they made some precipitate decision. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
I agree with you. I don't think there was any sinister motive. I think it's as simple a matter of prudence.
Yeah, gentlemen. Well, we're going on close to 15 minutes time left. There's one thing I want show out there too. There's a video going around on YouTube and it's on Facebook about a girl who came to Belize and had some rude experiences from guys calling out to her and whatnot. And she made a video suggesting that Belize is a no. She would never go there again. There were a lot of comments from people. Most of those were like, you know what? It happens everywhere, but it's not such a big deal and whatnot. And then another girl seemed like a San Pedriano, or from one of the districts came on and she made her video also supporting the person who was making the complaint and suggesting that yes, it happens a lot and that in Belize, they don't even allow you to walk down the street peacefully without hollering at you and screaming out at you. And any thoughts on that, fellas? Do you think it's as widespread as they're saying? Is it something that that is indeed a problem that must be looked at and addressed.
But how do you correct that type of social behavior? How do you address that? You know that if it happens, it's culturing, and it happens in some areas, and it doesn't happen everywhere. I've been to places, I've been to the Keys, and I see people walk about and nobody bother them. They may look at them, they may smile at them. Somebody may even whistle at them, but it depends on the individual. Some people take things too hard, and there is a point where a certain type of behavior I could see would make a young lady or a woman feels uncomfortable, and then but it's hard to address. It's hard to address. I guess if law enforcement see it happening in a way that a lot of people are gathered, a group of people are gathered and they're known for doing that, they could just kind of say, hey, ease up on it. But you can't arrest somebody for that.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to police that.
Yeah,
I think though also how some people are overly sensitive.
yeah,
So while some women will walk down the street and just accept it as a compliment or not pay it any mind,
right.
the next person will get terribly offended.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I don't know how much of it should be on them to realize that this is something that's not it's not as prevalent as you're saying. I don't think,
and
certainly
it's
not
cultural.
like
People, if you come from a Midwest state or something like that, you don't see people. So
yeah.
when somebody see you and whistle at you, 10 people whistle at you, and then it becomes an issue because you're not used to it. But it is. I can understand it being annoying for someone if it's not the attention they want.
I,
Well,
I think that
I think that it's different cultures. As you travel from one political destination to the next, you will encounter different cultures. And I could understand somebody coming from the OECD countries where there's a fair amount of regulations on just about everything, um, could be offended and feel that a destination like Belize should also be what they're used to. But I believe that um, once you do not go beyond a certain point, um, then you have to adapt to the culture where you are. In a sense, I personally do not see it as something that is a crisis. I believe that, in my view, Americans, and I could be overgeneralizing here, but they're used to dressing in ways that other people would find provocative, and there would be these macho whistles, etc., that goes on. And I'm not saying that I condone that, but it happens. And so, in a sense, women are you have an obligation to dress according to the culture. I was watching a documentary today of some Europeans basically doing, a YouTube video, and they went to Oman, and the women had to dress a certain way. So I'm saying that people need to adapt as they come south, especially. You know.
Uh,
I think that loss is in the nature of all human beings. So how that loss finds expression depends on its culture, as Mr. Bible said. If you go on the beach in Belize, for example, in a bikini, you might not draw that kind of attention. That's accepted. But if you dare walk down Albert Street in a bikini, no, that's different. That will not be too acceptable. So I think it's in the nature of us to loss, but how that loss finds expression, I think Mr. Maibit is right. And Mr. Morris says it depends on our culture.
yeah, I find that women too tend to want to choose who they want to do this to them. Um, I think they respond differently if it's maybe a good looking, well dressed person trying to approach them, Herb is somebody that they don't want got nothing to do with, look broken, kind of like out of the loop, no? So maybe also it's how they perceive it, how they receive it.
Yeah.
But still, because if you have your wife or your daughter, your sister, your mother walking down the street, you would want for them to not be bothered if they
Yeah.
don't want to be bothered. So at the end of the day, I think it's
But
maybe
Mr.
if it is a
Chairman,
part of our culture, they know part of the culture that should be addressed and
the,
looked at.
Mr. Chairman,
Mhm.
remember there's quote unquote sex at dawn. This is a book that I am advocating that people do read. What has driven the species Homo sapiens sapien, aka man, and civilization has been the attraction between opposite sexes. And I do believe that you have to bear in context that uh, a woman, the way of a woman reaching, recruiting a mate, you need it to be attractive. And across various species, and you see it in birds, you see it
I knew you were going to go there.
women and the females do reject, and they decide who they want to mate with. You see it in the Serengeti. You see it in the far north with these deers, the reindeers, and so human beings are just a continuation. I think
Well,
that we need to have laws and norms to make sure that it doesn't get physical.
Dante does list lust as one of the seven deadly sins. Um, I don't know though. I console myself in thinking that there's a difference between lust and fantasy. Lust are kind of like when you're going after it, but fantasizing in
Well,
uh,
where do you draw the line between lust and admiration, though, Mr. Chair?
well,
You say.
well, I'm still working on that. It's not. I haven't come to a firm conclusion as to how I work it out, but let's.
I think in general, some people are just a little sensitive, and
Let
some are
someone.
just a little too sensitive,
I think so.
and we just have to kind of leave it to them on their part and to decide if they don't like it, they don't like it.
Unfortunately, on top of those who are a little sensitive, there are those who jump on every bandwagon rolling. Once they see that, like anything that they find that they could jump on board, they will, and
Yeah.
make it seem worse than it really is. No,
Yeah. Well,
so
I haven't been to any other Caribbean country, but I've spoken and I have many Caribbean friends. And what they've told me is that kind of behavior in that they have where the guy hits at the girls and things like that and speak to them as they're moving along on the road. It seems to be a very common Caribbean practice. So I think wherever European and American and Canadian and such travels,
but Gregory,
they will
it's
encounter that behavior.
it's also very common among construction workers in the U.S. You know that women, when they pass a construction site, they pretty much expect that to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that it's certainly not exclusive to Caribbean countries. Certainly not to Belize. Now,
Yeah.
no matter, I don't know where we end about it. Are we going to discourage it? Are we going to just let it be and
Well,
hope?
how do you discourage it? How do you discourage it? I mean, it is family training. I don't think any outside institution can discourage it, other than, as I said, if it becomes a community problem, then law enforcement could just kind of gently tell people to ease up on it. It might be affecting commerce or something like that.
What I found interesting was that patriotism came into play, and that many people looked at it and said, "Oh, this is a foreigner that come to Belize and complain." And even many women were saying, "Well, I don't see nothing wrong with it. It doesn't happen to me
Exactly.
that often." So yeah, I think that, but the fact that a local also picked up on it and did her own YouTube video condemning it, then that gave it some merit, no?
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chair, um, not
Could,
because somebody
sorry.
screams that the sky is falling means that it is falling.
Yeah.
I think, in a sense, you almost have to validate what they are doing because people have different motives.
Right.
I could see somebody basically coming down with an agenda to say, you know what, I'll make a YouTube about this in Belize. And maybe you like as a scientist, I would have to ask the question. So if you have encountered males for 3 days, um, what percentage of males, in the case of a woman, what percentage of males got into a situation where you were discomforted? If you encountered 100 males and there were three incidents, is that the norm in terms of Western culture?
Correct. Correct.
In a sense, you almost have to do an analysis there. You
Yeah.
know,
You
Could
can't
it,
see. Go ahead, Joe.
could it be a form of gender prejudice too? Because let's reverse it. Suppose the women begin whistling at the men and making some overtures. Would it be
You wouldn't like that.
would it be different if the women were doing it to men?
Oh, no, I'm kidding. I would like it. Yeah, I'd be don't dressing like crazy, man. Um, no, but yeah, certainly. I don't know what the point is there because
Hey, if it was a nice looking girl, I'll say yes.
there it is. And that comes right back to what I'm saying that many women want to choose who
Yeah.
gets fresh with them. But I
Yeah.
think we've gotten to the point where, indeed, George made the point, oversensitive, and that it's difficult for a man even approach a woman anymore. Um,
yes.
I was looking at the situation in the U.S. and the standards that they hold their elected officials to, and I figure it kind of rough. I thought Cuomo in New York, and what brought him down was his apparent attraction to girls, and not even young girls or anything, but he apparently approached a couple of them inappropriately, or what they thought was, when they say touch your hair and whatnot, and America went crazy. We don't want him anymore. That's it. Uh, and it exposed some hypocrisy when you look at some of the things Trump was caught saying on camera. And by the way, what happened with Trump? Did he get arrested?
Didn't Trump talk about grabbing some aspect of the anatomy, Mr. Chair?
This is what I'm saying.
What you going to say about that?
And then you vote for him as
What would this
president.
woman say about that?
America is interesting. Didn't they vote for Marion Barry as mayor of DC after he was convicted smoking crack and went to jail for it? Came out and won again. So and they ultra Puritan and many areas staunchly. What they call it? They're just Puritan, but then in other areas they tend to turn the other to look the other way, turn a blind eye.
But Mr. Chair, I think you have to look at the opportunistic mode also.
Yeah.
You look at a lot of those stars that came down, that were brought down, Bill Cosby, etc. People are going way back to 1974. He touched me inappropriately.
Yeah.
In 1974.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that Bill Cosby got convicted. I thought that he must have had a non-lawyer as a lawyer. But to keep it straight, remember that the greatest drive of the species on this planet is procreation. And I think Joe did mention, well, what if women whistle at men? Well, really, you don't find women whistling per se, but they have their way of getting to us.
Getting your attention.
They would be batting their eyelids. They'll be swinging their hips. And I could go into this, but Mr. Morrison might be a man with a greater capacity in this area to say how the female species entrap, I would even say males. Mr. Morrison?
Yeah, well, you're putting me on the spot, but the women do have their ways of doing it. They, like you said, they bat their eyes, they smile, and what a woman told me once. She says, 2 seconds after I saw you, I knew I was going to have sex with you. So
Wow.
then I realized that with all my talking and all that, that wasn't what did it. She made her decision 2 seconds after she saw me.
And you know, it's funny, we're not hearing from one of the experts because Joe the one has been.
Well, that's why he's quiet.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that Mr. Morris was an expert, but
No, you got that one.
Joe
That
the
one down
chip.
in the corner. Be quiet.
oh boy.
My only experience is what the girl told me, that when she saw me 2 seconds after she decided I was going to be there. And
This was going to happen.
all my talking was just blowing it up. After a while, she says, "Let's get out of here."
Gentlemen, a good note to end on. Anybody got anything for? Say we're close to 9 o'clock, a minute away actually.
Well,
In
thanks
Belize,
very much.
actually. In Belize.
Well,
George?
no, I would say, Mr. Chairman, that I believe that the show is getting better, and it's not that we would not have hoped for this, but I believe that the tenor of the conversations and perhaps the subjects has led us to an area where I am definitely more comfortable speaking publicly on this platform. And I must say that I'm also a student, I'm a current student, and definitely you guys are providing, it's a teaching moment for me also.
Well,
So, the sky's the limit here.
yeah, let me say I really appreciate Joe's coming on, agreeing to be on more regularly. He brings a lot to the show. Gregory, of course, has his own analytical style that brings forth his point without being controversial. I see things looking well, and let's keep it going, fellas. Let's make it happen, right? Thanks a lot for your time this evening, folks. We'll see you next time, next week, same time, same place. Guys, have a nice one.
Peace.
Fire!
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh, oh. Here we go, here we go, here we go. As we flow, sing. Money, 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 money. Money, 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 money. Money is not the root of all evil. Love of money, that's the root of all evil. Right, yes or no? Vibes, level. Everything plumb and bevel. Keep a close eye upon the devil. Higher state of consciousness with the rebel. Bumper curfew, yeah, we go for tell the people. Let go. You have pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense, the common sense. About enough man dense, no know the difference. Fatal flaw, them have to pay the consequence. Pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense, the common sense. About enough man dense, no know the difference. Fatal flaw, them have to pay the consequence. Things in the grass greener, but the next side of the fence. For a few dollars more, they place them life in an achievement. They're robbing them brother, them sister, them friends, and them parents. Yet them still content. Fool no know what the dog when they got the board for the shadow. For the rest of them life, make hope them live in a sorrow. No make me catch the beg, the plea, the cry, the try and borrow. Me have for the check with you tomorrow. You have pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense, the common sense. About enough man bends, no know the difference. Fatal flaw, them have to pay the consequence. Pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense, the common sense. About enough man bends, no know the difference. Fatal flaw, them them have to be the consequence. You have $1 million and one day if you make $1 million. Bongo jet no need for the stand up on no street corner. Like a junko, like a vulture. They help Satan fi mash up my culture. Them claim say, in a God them trust me and the dread know. Feel them dollars run fossil. Aha, that judge them the cost. When frivolity then the loss. You have pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense that common sense. But enough man bends, no know the difference. Fatal flaw them have to be the consequence. Pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense that common sense. But enough man bends, no know the difference. Fatal flaw them have to be the consequence. Pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense that common sense. But enough man bends, don't know the difference. Fatal flaw them have to be the consequence. Pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense that common sense. But enough man bends, don't know the difference. Fatal flaw them have to be the consequence. You have pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense that common sense. But enough man bends, don't know the difference. Fatal flaw them have to be the consequence. Pounds and pence, dollars and cents. Most important sense that common sense. But enough man bends, don't know the difference. Fatal flaw them have to be the consequence.